Welcome to Beyond the Desk, a series where we go behind the scenes of our workspaces to understand some of the trends that are driving us forward.
The way we consume workspaces is changing, and it was already changing pre-pandemic, but the pandemic catalyzed a lot of this.
We live through information overload, right? And decision making is something that becomes difficult at times. And I think what you're doing right now is making work life a whole lot easier for people, and not just during the 9 to 5, but even pre and post that. Today, we're joined by Aryaman Langrana, AVP and Head of Transformation for CoWorks. Welcome to the podcast, Aryo.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
So I'm not going to ask you to introduce yourself, but I'm going to take a stab at it instead.
Okay.
I know you spent time across various industries and, in fact, across various countries, right? And you've always played the role of a lead in technology. And this is both from a strategic and transformation point of view. There's something that I've always wondered, what does transformation do?
So that's a great question. So at CoWorks, transformation really does a little bit of everything. Any projects that drive growth for the company, or any projects that involve making the company's processes a bit better is stuff that we would work on.
That's interesting. And how does it tie into the world of real estate? Because various industries have adopted technology, and I think real estate is also starting to take it up at this point of time. How do you see technology and your role playing into the larger picture here?
When we talk about technology for real estate, really there are two broad areas. One is in terms of how do you manage buildings? So there are building management systems, digital twins that allow you to virtually look at the health of a building, identify areas for preventive maintenance, and most importantly, allow you to manage, lighting, HVAC, which are your real energy consuming sort of areas for a building. Additionally, there is the more of the experiential side of PropTech, which is when you create an office space and you amenitize it, how do you allow the employees that work in that space to really engage with that space effectively? So those are kind of the two areas, broadly speaking, where technology is starting to solve problems when it comes to real estate.
Everything we do at CoWorks is always revolving around the employee experience. What are some of the ways that technology is playing into this vision that we have for the company? And how do you think co-working is adopting technology to better cater to the customer?
When it comes to co-working spaces, you typically have tenants, different tenants of different sizes of employees working out of these spaces. And particularly for us at CoWorks, employee experience, so the experience that people have when they work in these spaces is extremely important. And to do that, there are a bunch of things that typically co-working players do. So one is, the basic functional stuff of getting you set up, your Wi-Fi, all that stuff. Then you've got things surrounding employee experience, such as events and so on. But, even if you zoom out of just a co-working space to a larger workspace, run by a tenant, or when you zoom out even further to a campus, really, when you think about employee experience, it's about how you make sure that the space that you provide is it's well designed. Secondly, it's easy to use. And third is, it's amenitized so that people can get a little bit more of their work done at the campus or at the office space than they were doing previously. And there are a few, very clear trends that are driving this. So for example, one is, as the workspace changes, there's a generational shift happening. You have Gen Z and millennials forming a large chunk of the workspace today. And for a large part, they're completely digitally native. So thinking about how you're able to virtually fulfill all this stuff isn't really an option anymore. You have to do it because that's what your audience demands. Secondly, the next big sort of trend that's driving this is that the value drivers for how you choose an employer or how you choose a workspace is also shifting a little bit. For, let's say, my parents' generation. For them, it was about, am I making the right amount of money? Do I have the right designation? And stability, right? Spending a lot of time within a company was considered to be a good thing. Today, there's a lot of research showing that the value driver still primarily would be money and designation. But beyond that, Gen Z particularly is looking for alignment of their value system to their employer and by extension to their workspace. And this could be surrounding, diversity and inclusion. This could be surrounding sustainability. This could be surrounding ensuring that, it's a technology-forward organization.
Today's generation is looking for much more from their workspace. It's no more about the 9 to 5. It's also about what you're able to offer the employee while they're at work, as well as after work. So I think, building that infrastructure and being able to tie it all together is very, very important. And I know you've been doing some exciting work on that field, and we'll get into it at a later point of time. I want to spend a little time talking about something that's a little more important, and that comes to the values that an individual has, right? And how you make a decision to work with a particular employer. I would personally make a decision basis a couple of factors, and for me, sustainability is one of those important aspects. I think if we have to look at the world around us right now, there's so much chaos going on that we need to solve for a better future. How do you see technology playing a role over here, and how do you see us catering to that requirement for businesses?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Climate change is one of the biggest challenges that we have to solve today. A lot of companies, investors particularly, now have very aggressive net zero goals. Most companies have sustainability charters of their own. And even individual employees, want to align themselves with companies that have responsible practices, and sustainability is one of them. From a sort of a building office space point of view, there is a lot of embodied carbon based on the materials that you use to build the building. And in a lot of cases, those buildings have already been built. But there's so much that you can do, when it comes to IoT, management of energy usage, which collectively has a big impact on the overall mission to reverse climate change. Now, how we do this is you have the ability now, and the IoT technology to help you manage buildings, manage energy usage have become a lot more approachable. It's not a new or particularly sexy technology right now, but it has become much more accessible. Both from a cost standpoint, from an implementation standpoint. And that's something that is easy to roll out and shows, sort of benefits almost immediately. If you effectively manage your energy usage, which you can do using IoT and building management systems, it has a direct impact on how much money you save on energy usage, as well as reducing overall energy consumption, which is a big win from an environmental standpoint.
Are these factors that companies come to you with when they look at leasing spaces from us? Is this a mandate that people look at energy consumption and certain measures that we're taking from the sustainability aspect when they're looking out for a workspace?
A lot of companies now have this on their sort of RFPs and their checklists. Does it become a deal breaker? Unfortunately, at this point, no. But that shift is starting to come into play a lot more. Today, maybe it's not the most important thing when they're making a choice, but it is moving in that direction, and that's a good thing. So we need to be prepared for when we get to that point where it actually becomes a deal breaker.
That's so important. I think building a greener and better future for all of us is one of the key pillars that we believe in and that we drive forward at every juncture of our business operations. Let's spend a little time talking about experience and how technology really mirrors the whole working environment for an employee working out of a co-works office or a workspace for that matter. Tell me a little bit about how you see technology translating into this, as well as what are some of the things that you've been working on where technology plays a vital role in enhancing the user experience of a member working out of one of our workspaces?
I think the one thing that's important to note at this stage is that the way we consume workspaces is changing. And it was already changing pre-pandemic, but the pandemic catalyzed a lot of this. So the one thing is, in urban cities in India, there has been a population explosion, as we all know. Cities have been expanding, and when that expansion happens, there is no longer the concept of the single town square or that single central part of the city. As you develop micro markets, infrastructure for those micro markets, and not only just in terms of schools or hospitals, but also in terms of entertainment options and so on, all start aggregating within those micro markets. So really there isn't a need that much anymore to travel one end of the city to the other to do what you want to do. Now, what we want to do is take an extension of that and say that when you come into an office campus, we want to be able to provide a little bit more than what office campuses are traditionally meant to provide. And one of the reasons is, yes, we want to, make sure you don't have to travel too much. But the other reason also is that when you look at a lot of studies and a lot of research that has gone into what does flexibility mean to employees, what is actually genuinely surprising is that flexibility doesn't mean that I only come to work 2 days a week, but more often it means that I want flexibility with my time. So I'm happy to come into work 5 days a week, but you'll have to give me flexibility on when I come in and when I leave. And as a result of that, what we're now realizing is that it's important to amenitize the workspace. Bring in different amenities that allow you to accomplish a lot more than just your work in that given period of time. And that one is it helps you bring more people back into the office more times a week. But what it also does is that it creates a little bit of stickiness to the product. Now, where technology plays into this is that as an employee who's working, in a campus, I don't necessarily know everything that the campus has to offer. I don't necessarily know how to book it. And where technology comes in is that we want to provide sort of the single window view into your workspace. So whether you want to learn about everything that the campus has to offer in terms of amenities, you want more information about it, you want to be able to book it, you want to be able to understand availability, all that should be done through this one application. As an extension of that, there's also sort of the administrative stuff, right? Things like access, parking, setting yourself up on Wi-Fi, all of that create these tiny friction points in your workday. And we want to be able to provide all of that information, all the tools that you need to be able to accomplish these things all within this one application.
So does that mean that I can access my entire campus sitting in my office? Whether I need to book a session at the Turf or book a yoga session, all of that is accessible essentially through this piece of technology that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Doesn't that come with a cost?
Yeah, I mean, it sure is expensive. And if you were an individual company that didn't have, tens of thousands of employees, this would be quite expensive for you to do. But we're solving for this at scale, right? We've got, tenants across industries with hundreds of thousands of employees that work within the spaces that we manage. So from a cost point of view, it works out. It's not that expensive.
So since we're talking technology and personal preferences, what's the one thing that you think was better when it was analog? I'll give you mine if you like.
Yeah, okay, go for it.
It was telephones, in fact, because today you're sitting in a day and age where you're always reachable, right? Unless you're vacationing in Bali, which you often do. Mm-hmm. You're always reachable. And I think when we had analog telephones, you could always take the headset off the instrument and pretend that you were busy.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was one of my preferences.
I think for me, it would have to be books. I think you have Kindle and you can read books on your phone or your tablet, but I think just the feeling of a book in your hands, I think that's something that I really miss.
This is everything that's happening right now, but how does the future look and what's in store for us at CoWorks?
This is where it gets, I think, really interesting because there is a lot of stuff that we have planned that's super exciting. So today, it's a bit functional in the sense that you're able to book the amenities at the campus, you're able to learn about events that are happening, at the workspace. But it's not really intelligent in the sense that it's not helping serve up to you information that you need to help you plan your day. And that's where we eventually want to get to. So we want to get to a stage where aggregating information from different sources, right? How busy is the parking lot? Is public transportation running on time or running behind? I can give you a recommendation that perhaps today you should use public transport or, use your own transport on a particular day. We could be more intelligent about helping you make decisions on what food you want to eat that day, whether you want to bring something from home or do you want to try out a special that's at the campus, and so on and so forth. So really, the workday is the biggest chunk of time in your day when you're awake. And the eventual objective of this is that we want to help you plan it more efficiently. And when you do make decisions on what you want to do with that time, we have a very intuitive, easy way for you to actually execute or implement those decisions.
We're living in an age where we live through information overload, right? And decision making is something that becomes difficult at times. And I think what you're doing right now is making work life a whole lot easier for people, and not just during the 9 to 5, but even pre and post that. How do you see this translating into a solvable product for organizations?
From a tenant point of view or an organization point of view, one of the big problems that still exists today is hybrid working. We've seen this push and pull between employees and employers about how much time they should be spending in the office.
Hasn't that improved though?
I mean, it has, and you're seeing a lot more people coming into the office a lot more times a week. But there are a lot of companies that still haven't decided on what their final approach is. And there was a survey that was done to understand that how many companies have really figured out how to handle hybrid. And the answer was that it was in the early 30s that had actually had a policy in place that this is how we're going to manage hybrid. A lot of the other companies are in a wait and watch mode to see how it sort of plays out. The one thing that can help companies make decisions on hybrid and how to solve for it is actually quite intelligent technology that helps you manage how your office space is used. Today, and the technology does exist today. So for example, today, it's quite functional. You can choose to book a seat when you want to come into the office and correspondingly book meeting rooms and so on. But today it's reactive in the sense that it just tells you that this is how many seats are available. And then based on that, you make a decision of whether you want to come into work that day or not. But the decision on whether you want to come to work is actually dependent on a lot more than just availability, right? It depends on how many in-person meetings you have that day. It depends on your extended team, not just within the team that you work with, also in other departments that you engage with more frequently. It also just really depends on your boss and whether they want to see you in office or not. So your decision on when you want to come to work actually is a lot more complex. And we could very easily use tech to help you solve for that. So teams that need to co-locate on a particular, for a particular frequency can be intelligently mapped to spread out the load across the office space. Now, what this does is that, one, it helps you intelligently manage who should come to work and on what day. But also what it does is that it then takes away the pain of all the subsequent steps that you need to do once you decided to come into work. So for example, it'll help you take care of your parking, book a slot for you maybe, or advise you that typically today's not a good day to bring your own car, so you can choose to bring public transport. It could also help you with planning activities before and after work, again, going back to what we were doing with the Converge product. But I think also what it does, the big organizational benefit here is that it helps you optimize how you utilize space. And you've seen the shift happening from a workspace standpoint over the years, right? You've seen senior management coming out of cubicles and working in sort of open format spaces, office spaces where open format spaces are now being converted more into sort of more informal collaboration zones. And sort of this shift is what tech can help you optimize. So it can tell you, especially if your office space is modular, it can help you decide how to configure so that you're effectively making use of the space that you've taken.
And what that does is it solves the problem of flexibility for the employee while solving the problem of an expensive workplace for the employer as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Great.
And also it helps a lot in terms of how you design. Today, as an individual company, we don't have enough insight into how workspaces are utilized to help you make those decisions. But given that co-working companies or managed office companies typically have access to a much larger data pool of how office space gets utilized. And there are so many variables there as well, right? There could be, depending on the industry, depending on the type of office location, whether it's a front office location or a R&D location. So depending on all these variables, the right mix of space between collaboration zones, between focused work zones, and between sort of more informal meeting places, the configuration of an office space becomes a lot more scientific rather than just, a little bit of guesswork.
Where do you think majority of the focus is going these days? We've got offices that have now obviously translated into very differently designed spaces. You've got large community areas, you've got dedicated cubicles, you've also got discussion booths and phone booths, right, where you have the privacy to take your own calls or spend some time just giving your work some thought. Where do you think majority of the attention is focused now? Do you think the whole community lounge aspect of it is something that is favored by companies and by employees? Or do you think we're moving back into the approach where we look at traditional offices, but with a more open setup?
It depends a lot on the type of the industry that you're in. It depends a lot on how formal or informal the organization is. Particularly new age companies or very tech forward companies have a very different approach to how offices are designed and used. How formal or informal an organization is dictates a lot about how office spaces get consumed. Where I think it's technology can play a great role is in helping to monitor these usage patterns, right? Today, it can be done. In fact, most companies have the capability of doing it today based on the different access control software that they use or the meeting room software that they use. But it's all sitting in different places at this point in time. What we're trying to do is bring it all into this one data lake, if you like, where you're able to actually aggregate all these different inputs to help you make really scientific decisions on how to configure your office spaces. Let me ask you a question for a change. If you could wave a magic wand and have an app that could do anything, what would that app be?
We live in an age where you have an app to do almost everything, if not everything. Top of my head, maybe an app that can iron my clothes. And we call it Iron Man.
Actually, there is a product from Samsung that can do that for you. It's
really?
A smart closet, which...
I should get my hands on that.
Yeah, you really should. I would like an app that can go to the gym for me.
I can help you with that, but you're still going to have to get out of bed.
Oh, okay, then it doesn't work then.
It's been great having this conversation, Aryo. I think, we've really understood the depth of technology and how it plays out in the world of real estate. I do have one last question for you, though, and that's more of a personal question. If you had a hold over technology in the future, how do you chart it out over the next 5 years?
I think what will happen is you'll have more data security with blockchain. You'll have more connected, seamless offline to online experiences with IoT. You'll see a lot of changes to the way people work because of AI. That's going to potentially disrupt just the way people work, the same way that the Industrial Revolution did with manufacturing and assembly lines. You'll see changes coming, particularly from renewable forms of energy. I think the big thing is fusion technology, which is starting to look viable. So that's something that's really interesting and something to look forward to.
All right, great. So that brings us to the end of our first episode. Thank you so much for your time, Aryo.
Thank you for having me.
If you like this conversation, hit the subscribe button and stay tuned for more.